Hi guys, and welcome back to another Apex Racing Academy setup tutorial. It's Alex Simpson here, and we are in the brand new Dallara P217 LMP2 prototype. And this is part 3 of our 3-part series on how to set this car up. If you haven't watched the first 2 videos, please do go check them out. Some really good information in there. In this video, we're going to be talking about the brakes, and we are going to be talking about the drivetrain and perhaps differential, and how that kind of works, and what we might do to kind of help us set these things up. Um, right, let's jump right back into it. Oh, no, sorry, before that, if you are watching this on our Academy Discord, thank you very much for joining. I appreciate you joining the service, and I hope you're finding it useful. Feel free to ask us any questions in our Discord channel, and we will come back to you as quick as possible, or jump into our hosted sessions each week, or just grab one of the coaches when they're in on comms in one of the practice sessions or anything. They're all more than happy to help out. Um, if you are watching this back on YouTube, or you're watching it back on the iRacing forum, then yeah, thanks very much for showing an interest. And if this is part 3, you've obviously enjoyed the first 2, so I appreciate. If you guys have any questions, please post them on the iRacing forum, or post them in the comments on the video. Um, we're happy to help out, but obviously, as long as you guys understand that we try and reserve a lot of the real nitty gritty for our members. We put these videos out there to try and help the community as a whole. But yeah, the real juicy stuff we try and hold back for our members. If you want to join, there's a link in the description of the video. And yeah, if you're watching on iRacing, then I think on the forum post we give away some free memberships for this season as well. So as a bit of a trial, just to kind of get a feel what the academies are all about, and then you can ask that juicy stuff. Right, now I'm jumping straight back into it. I've seen a problem already with the lighting here. I don't know if you guys knew it, but Academy Green or Apex Blue is worth 2/10 of a second lap time. So if you haven't got the lighting set to there, well, get it changed ASAP. That will find some instant time, and also a lot more respect from all of our academy members on the circuit as well. Right. Serious stuff. Onto the brake specs then. So we have a pad compound. We have low, medium, and high. And if you've drove or driven a GT car, you will have come across that before. It's kind of like the pressures of the brakes. And typically, the pro guys tend to run with a low pad compound over a medium or a high. The car doesn't have like an ABS, so we have the ability to lock the front end of this car up. So we kind of have to be careful of that. We don't want to look the car up. Now with like the GT3s, for example, we've got the ABS, so we can really abuse it with a high friction braking. Um, but even when you run a high friction braking, the car what so I should explain. So the difference between a small, medium, and high is the stopping distance of the car. Now it would make sense, right, to have the high friction and have the car stop as quickly as possible, because the braking distances are as short as possible then, so people can't overtake you. And surely that's the fastest way around the lap if you're on the brakes for as short a time as possible. Does make sense. However, when we run the high friction or the high pad compound, what is happening is that we basically put so much additional load on the tire that it's easier for it to lock up, and it's uh, the temperature is just sky high very, very quickly in that short load. We tend to find that even though we're braking for a short period of time, the temps are so much higher going on. And as we know, iRacing is super, super sensitive to the temperature of the tire. So it may be that when we run a low compound for the brake pads here that we've actually, even though we've extended our braking zone by maybe, I don't know, 3, 4 car lengths, let's just say that as a rough figure. It might be more, it might be less. Um, but our tire, we can get the car stopped down to the same speed, but our tire temperature is so much lower that we actually are able to carry maybe 5 or 10 kilometers an hour extra speed through the middle of the corner. So, why we might lose a tenth on the way in, we are probably gaining 2 tenths through the middle of the corner, and then we're gaining all the time on the way out as well and accelerating out of the corners because we're carrying that extra 10 kilometers an hour all the way down the straight until we basically peak out. Um, so yeah, keep that in mind as to why people will run low. Don't just instantly think, oh, got to go to high. Um, might not always be the case. We might only be doing short little braking zones, a lot of high speed circuits where we're not heavy on the brakes. I'm thinking Watkins, for example. We don't have whopping great big braking zones at like Watkins. So that might be a circuit that might be more beneficial for a medium or maybe a high, because we don't overheat. Now, the only way you can really tell that is, well, one, by checking optimals in each sectors, and by also checking the tire temperature in your advanced tools like VRS and Motec and Atlas, for example. So very difficult for us to truly know without looking at that. As I explained in the first video, these last temperatures, they are useless to us. They're not an average. And if you're braking to a stop to get out of the car, that's all the information you get, the temperature in terms of braking to a stop. So yeah. So keep that in mind as to why we some of the settings that you might be given or sets that you're shared through the community or via the thing academy. I shouldn't call it the thing, I guess. Is via, it might be a medium or a low, because actually we're trying to maintain a minimum speed through the corner to actually gain time. Your brake pressure bias, everyone pretty much knows what this is, fairly standard. The further forward it is, so a larger number, so over 50% and above, means you're braking more on the front tire, more on the front tires than you are the rear tires. If your braking percentage is 50% and below, it's more on the rear than it is on the front. Um, so if you get given a setup that maybe say is like this 49.8, and say at Spa into turn one, you find that the car loops itself. The back end just always coming round, or it's really sketchy under braking. Then perhaps your particular drive braking style compared to your friend or the academy coach perhaps leans a little bit more onto the rear for whatever reason, and then you will perhaps need to move your brake bias just ever so slightly forward to kind of compensate for that, and that will stabilize the car up in that braking zone. Now, if the opposite's true, you get one, say, at 50.8 or, 54 or something like that, and you're like, my God, the car does not turn in some of these corners, then what it possibly is this brake bias is too far forward. So I always feel like you should adjust your brake bias to the point where the car feels comfortable braking on every corner. That way, you've kind of got this efficient braking, so you're not overheating the front tires. You're not likely to lock up the rears and lose control. And it might be that you might adjust it during the race, because as they wear, you might need to go an extra click forward or something like that with the in-car adjustments. Can be useful. Now, some drivers will adjust it per corner, yeah, or perhaps 2 or 3 corners on the circuit. They'll be like, I need a percent forward, and then the rest of it they move it back, and yeah, that can be kind of useful because you can fine tune there as well. You know, I think there are tools that will help you do that as well that you can utilize. Fuel level. We don't need to go into any detail of that. Let's talk about traction control. So we've got traction control gain and traction control slip. Um, just quickly, I need to check it to make sure I'm going to tell you the right thing because it's not so straightforward. It's not just a simple traction control. Right. So let me read this to you then. You can obviously see it. Gain is the magnitude of traction control intervention. Higher equals more aggressive torque cut, larger reduction in engine power once TC slip threshold has been reached. Okay. So what we have is we have a two-part traction control then. So if I read the second part, which is setting on how aggressive the TC tries to control slip. Higher equals intervention at smaller differences in left rear and right rear wheel speed, increased TC activation sensitivity. Okay. Okay. So what this is basically saying is this traction control gain here kicks in after the setting here on the slip and how aggressive it is. So what we can say is that we can go, do you know what, a one setting here, so higher equals differences. Okay, so a one setting is like, right, I am going to let the difference in the left and rear wheels be massive. You know, I don't really want much kick in at all. Now, of course, um, you've got these different settings. So you've got all the way up to 12 and you've got 1 as well. So this is essentially as little traction control as you can possibly get. And then for each one extra, there's a higher setting here. Now, again, I will believe that the way typically with iRacing works, say a 112 is a certain amount of traction control. So this is we are really saying, look, we are quite happy for the rear end to be kind with a one setting on the slip here to be kind of doing its thing. Um, but what we are saying is like when it goes beyond that point of beyond that point of like, oh dear, we're about to lose the car, you know, we want this would say, right, we want the traction control to come in hard. You know, we want it to stop. So it's like we don't want it to kick in at all, but when it does, it needs to make sure we don't spin out, you know? And we're going to lose a load and load of power at that point. It's going to cut the torque massively. Um, when we're cutting power, of course, that effectively is going to slow us down in terms of acceleration. So we only want as much traction control as we need based on our setup. So you don't want to go, right, okay, I want 12 and 12. I just want as much traction control as possible. That will basically mean any tiniest little twitch coming out of the corner, traction control is going to cut your power so much so that anyone that can drive the car off the corner on a lower setting will breeze past you. That's why we would want to adjust this setting and not have it here. So yeah, if we can't drive with a 1-1, for example, if the car is just constantly spinning out or spinning up the tires, then it may be that we need to increase. So what we would do is we would try a 1 all the way up through to 12 and go, right, does that kick in fast enough to prevent us from spinning out? Yes or no? If it's a no, then we're going to need to go up to the 2, back down to 1, and try again. Now, there's a lot of settings to try there. Now, this would be obviously you're going to be building a set from, or this is more about, sorry, building a set rather than adjustment. Let's say the coach gives you just, what's the baseline again? Let's say they give you a 3-6 as a starting point, and you're like, do you know what? Um, this car is so good, I can put my foot flat to the floor coming out of every corner on this circuit. Then in that case, that tells me that the traction control is too high. So what I would try doing to start off with is perhaps reducing this gain down first and seeing if it's still the same, whether or not it will, you can just mash the throttle. If you can, then come down onto 2 and perhaps come back up to your original 6 here and go at it again. If it's still good, then bring it down to the point where you're like, do you know what? Oh, that's a bit sketchy now. Yeah. And then you back it back up a couple of clicks. And then what you know is you are not getting any restriction in the amount of acceleration you can come down. You have basically got it in that absolute sweet spot for you. Um, so yeah, it may be that you're not as aggressive as the coach, and that's why you can put this, have this at a lower setting. So yeah, do keep that kind of in mind as well. And that's kind of how to fiddle. Of course, if the opposite is true, if you get given a 3-6 and the thing just spins, like you're like, oh my god, I need more, then you can try coming up to 12 first, so it's a bit more aggressive and seeing what that does. And if that does, that's quite a lot of torque that is cutting out when it kicks in. But how much so does it do it? If you think actually no, that's kind of fine, then what um, or it's perhaps it's not enough, sorry, then what you can do is you can go up to a 4. So you go, well, let me try a 4 and a 6, and let me see if that does it. Because you really want this setting and this setting to be as low as you can get them generally. So by going to a 4, say you tried the 3 and the 12, and you're like, no, it's not enough. I'm just going to try 412, and then you'd be like, oh yeah, it's fine now, but is it too much? Are you now losing too much power? This is why it's worth coming back to like a 4-6 and then going, oh yeah, actually, what, that the four is good. Um, maybe I'm still getting a little bit, then go up to the 7. You go, yeah, do you know what? I am pretty good now. I feel like that's really comfortable. And that's kind of where you want to be. Right, a throttle shape. Let me just double check. This will normally be like the butterfly or the S effect. Yes, with 1 through to 12. So what we've got, so let's look at this as a graph across here. So we've got power and we've got throttle position, so 1 to 100% down. A linear, let me check what 1 is linear. It's usually 1. So 12, yep, 1 is linear. So a linear setting, the more you push the pedal, the more power you get. Yeah, so it's nice, linear, straight line. With an S shape, so what we're doing is we're effectively ramping this throttle up earlier at the start. So that's your linear line, and this is the S. And it's going to go to a certain point, and then it's going to start to level off for a while, and then it's going to start to come back in again as we reach 100%. Always at 100%, we're at 100%. But it's how quickly it gets to the 12, for example, is going to be more aggressive. It's going to be over here, like the initial peak is going to be somewhere, around sort of 20 or 30%. And then it's going to stay level for quite some period of time and then start to ramp back up slowly. Um, a, um, a, a 2 is going to be much more like a linear setting. So it's perhaps going to come up here and then it's going to level for a little bit, drop underneath the linear line, and then come back up as well. And then you'll have different combinations. Unfortunately, we don't have the graphs from iRacing to know what the throttle shape is. But what this does, the reason you'll want this here, this kind of acts like a traction control built into the throttle shape of the car. Now, it might be that our setup is so good that we can get away with these low, um, perhaps a low traction set in something like this, in combination with using a say like let's go with like a 10 throttle shape. Because what this throttle shape will do, and this is something you should probably test before changing any of these traction control settings, is this will ramp up to a point. Now, most race cars will be able to take a good portion of the throttle percentage being hammered through it without breaking traction. It's only when we get into the massive power range, up and in the 80% throttles, or perhaps even higher, where the rear tires suddenly are like, oh, I can't take the amount of load you're putting me through, and they start to wheel spin. And what this is doing, this is saying, well, let's ramp up the power quite quickly so that we get that extra punch out of the corner. But when we get just before the point where the traction starts to break, where we start to break traction on the rear tires, we're going to plateau the throttle shaping out for a while, let the tires regain their control, or basically, you know, not lose control. And then once the loads start to diminish because we gained more speed, so suddenly there's not as much demand going through it, or either we have more downforce on the car, so we can then put more load through the tires, or we've gained speed, so there's not as much G-force pushing through the car anymore. It then starts to build back up again towards 100%. But essentially, you've got more throttle down quicker, so you're faster out of the corner, and you're using the automatic shape in the throttle position to kind of kick in at the right place so that you don't get wheel spin. And then you go again. So you're always kind of going to have this better acceleration profile than you would via a linear. Of course, you can do it yourself. You can be really aggressive with the pedal and then lift a little bit at about 80%, or just slow down how much you put it and then apply it again. And you often see that in the coach's throttle chases. Now, will they be traces? Sorry, will they be using a linear one, or will they be using the Essence? You won't know until you get the setup. But typically, the the S-shaped throttle shape is a really good thing to do if you were kind of comfortable in establishing, setting it up for yourself. Your throttle profile is going to be different to anybody else's throttle profile. How aggressive you are coming out of the corner. You might have a lead foot, and then you might have to anything above linear might be terrible, because like linear might give you the wheel spin really low down because you're hammering it so fast that there's hardly any difference. But I would think typically, a S shape would be better, even if it's like a 2 or a 3 might be just a little bit better. But you've kind of got to get used to kind of what that is doing. Um, don't set it so high for yourself that you're quite aggressive with the gas, and then it's wheel spinning the tires, and you're like, oh crap, you know, I'm just all over the shot. I'll just add more traction control. You know, what you want to do is you want to use this so you don't have to have so much traction control. But it might be that again you're given a set that's perhaps on an 8, and you probably for yourself like 6 might be the sweet spot. So instead of it spiking up here, it's kind of over here instead. And then you can run a lower traction control and know all full well that actually you're not going to get any restriction in power. Right. Let's talk about the diff then. I will talk about gear ratios at the end. Typically, you're not going to change those too much. And I'll talk about how to sort of set a gearbox up from scratch rather than adjust it, because I think everybody knows if you haven't got enough speed what you need to do. Um, so just a rear diff on these new P2s, unlike the P1s that have a front and rear diff. What we have is we have a drive and coast ramp angle, and so what we have, which one is which? I'm assuming drive is the first one and coast is the second. Uh, yes, doesn't say specifically, but let's assume that is. Sometimes the thing with iRacing's little description things, it's an engineer writing it for you, rather than a layman. It doesn't help, but we are going to assume that that is the case. Our number has yeah, keeping both sides of the yeah, yeah. I absolutely do not say which is which is which. See, now they could have wrote drive and coast here, but the number here, 60, could be the drive, and 30 is the coast. Might make sense because we go into a corner, we're coasting into a corner before we put drive on. So, if anyone from iRacing has watched this, Perhaps you could qualify that for us. It would be useful to kind of know. I suppose, in a sense, looking at these, no, we need to know this because we've got a higher, we've got a higher figure here and a lower figure here. Now, if if they were even going up all the way, so say if this was a 65 and that was a 70, it wouldn't matter because it's always more locking front, in or out. But this is not. This is less locking one way, more locking on another. So we need to know that. We need confirmation of that. I'm going to assume it's drive and coast because that's how they've written it there, and it would be ludicrous for them to have put the number elsewhere. But um, if someone wants to tag a staff member or something like that and get them to answer that question, we need to know. Um, right, but for the purpose of this video, that is the drive number, that is the coast number. So what this is basically saying is the higher the number, the more locking force we have on a differential. And when we have more locking force on the differential, we're going to produce more understeer in the car. And because this setting here affects both the in and out of a corner, so coast is obviously when we're braking into a corner, so we're not on power. Drive is when we're actually accelerating. Um, at one time, we have whatever setting we do is going to affect the car in both circumstances, entry or exit. Mm, yeah, maybe not. Because we have this 45 and 55 and 45 and 70. So if you're given this setting, for example, and then you change to the 45/70, you're only affecting it in one area of the car, of the corner. So let's start off with this 45/50 then, and then we'll work from there. So um, I believe the 45 is talking about the drive off of the corner. So that's how much locking force we have coming off the corner and how much understeer we're asking the diff to give us. If if we're saying, for example, going into a corner, we have got a bit of over rotation coming in and we need more locking force. We want to just tidy the car up a bit. What we can do is we can go to a 45/70, and that will give us the same rotation and the same exit profile off the corner because the drive is still 45, but the entry coast ramp angle is now at 70, which is more severe. So we have more lock-in, more understeer, and that brings the car under more control. Of course, if you start the setup and you're on the 45/70, but you feel there's understeer going into it, but the exit is absolutely fine, then change to a 45/55. If, however, we're at 45/55 and you're like, "Do you know what? I have got a bit of understeer a bit of everywhere. Like it doesn't quite turn in quite how I want it and doesn't quite exit the corner how I want it as well. You want more rotation, then this is where your 30 and 60 ramp angle will come into play. Friction plates are like a multiplier of your preload. So this is basically a kind of like how, in terms of this setting, actually how much locking force are we putting on? You've got some defaults to adjust the specifics of a corner, or in terms of entry versus exit. And then this is the general overall amount of locking force we have. So what have we got? We've got a 12 is our max, 4 is our minimum, and they start us off on 6. Okay. And then we have our preload setting. So what we have is this is so four faces. Four faces have 2 times the locking of two faces. Okay, and so on and so forth, basically. Um, we can't even select 2, so that's helpful to have that in the description as well. 6 has 3 times the amount. Yeah, so from a 4 to an 8, so that's that's double the amount of locking force in there. That is kind of like 1.5 times the locking force, and so on and so forth, basically as a percentage increase. So what we're saying is we're taking the 75 Newton meter preload on a 4 clutch plate here. And if we basically go to 6, we have now, sorry, now an 8, we have doubled the locking force in the diff. So be mindful of that. It's quite a big change just to go up to an 8. So if you don't quite want double, for example, obviously you could use 6, but you could also come back down a little bit on the preload. This is a way to give yourself a bit of finer control over the amount of locking force on the diff overall. Um, Again, more locking force. So any number higher this way is going to make the car both understeer both more on entry and exit. Any number lower this way is going to give you more rotation both entry and exit. And then you can fine tune the entry or exit a little bit using these ramp angles as well. Right, final thing to talk about with this car, and we're talking about the gear ratios. Now, like I say, if you get a set and you're peaking out at the end of a straight, then all you really need to do, well, it's even easier because there's 3 settings. Oh, I was thinking it was going to be individual settings. So you've got the short. Let me adjust that. So that's got top speed 285 and then starts at 139 and apply that. Standard is 139 and 312. So really, this looks like speed at first gear doesn't change. Absolutely, it doesn't. So very little for you to do. But if you, so yeah, so let's say for example, you find you are at a circuit, and if for whatever reason it's got a short one on there, and you're at Monza, for example, and you're peaking out way too early before the braking zone, then all you do is you come in here and you change to a standard gearbox or something like that, and see if that allows you to do it. It might be that you're at Le Mans, and then this is probably where a tall gear ratio is going to come in because we're running such low downforce that we're going to be able to do nearly 340 kilometers an hour, which is insane speed for an LMP2. Um, that would be awesome. So yeah, that's pretty easy for you to tell which gear ratio you or gear stack you need to use per track. Basically, you set it to the shortest you can get so that you don't peak out in the draft on the longest straight. So if that even at Le Mans happens to be standard, then go with standard. The reason you'd want to go with that is because you'll get a faster. The car will accelerate faster if the gear ratio is right. If you're just running really long gears, it's just not. It's going to take longer to get up to speed. So you're going to give away um, straight line speed, max straight line speed at the end of the straight, kind of thing, through the speed traps and things like that. And that is lap time that you're losing. So do go and check that ever so quickly when you get a set and make sure that it is set right for you. Right. That's us done then. That's everything on this brand new Dallara. I hope that you found this video useful. As I said at the start of the video, if you're watching it on the Academy Discord, awesome guys, man. Thanks for really appreciate you joining and subbing to our service, and hope you found all the setups and the hosting sessions and the coaching and everything that goes on in them useful. If you have any questions about this videos, just hit me up on there, and I will try and respond as quickly as I possibly can. If you're watching it on YouTube or you're watching it on the iRacing forums, you're more than welcome to post in the comments or on the iRacing forum, and we will try and answer you the best we can on there. But we do obviously say that we run obviously a premium service for our Academy members, and we might hold back a little bit on some information in terms like we'll perhaps help out, point you in the right direction, or repoint you back to parts of the video and things like that. But yeah, we prioritize giving as much information to our Academy members as we can possibly give. But we wanted to get this video out there for the community so that you guys can kind of all benefit from it. Right. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you spending the time to watch this video. If you're still listening to me ramble on at this point, it just means it's worthwhile doing. But yeah, until till the next video, I think I've got a Corvette that I'm about to do after this one. Yeah, I'll perhaps catch you in that one. But until then, yeah, enjoy the racing out there, and we'll see you on track.